We make on average 35,000 conscious and unconscious decisions every day. What's different now to 50 years ago, we didn't used to have so much choice.
No, it's the paradox of choice, right?
Who to date, where to live, what to wear, what to watch, what to eat. We never used to have this abundance of choice. So much has changed in how we work and live. So I felt like some of the frameworks and books about decision making, as brilliant as they are, they needed a bit of updating. I have a friend who's neurodivergent, ADHD, and he had read my book and he said to me, I wish I'd had that rule years ago.
I know you have these sort of 6 golden rules. Run us through those 6.
The first one is to...
The average person makes about 35,000 decisions a day. For neurodivergent people, even small choices can feel overwhelming, triggering anxiety and decision paralysis. That's why we've brought you Adrienne Adhami, podcaster, business advisor, keynote speaker, and author of Decisions That Matter. She's worked with industry leaders like Microsoft, Spotify, and Range Rover, helping people make intentional decisions in a world full of distractions. Let's get into it. Let's see how great minds think differently. What's the best decision you've ever made in your life?
The best decision I've ever made in my life, and it's pretty bold, I suppose, now looking back, was the decision to leave home. I was 16 years old when I left home. I was living up north in Leeds with my mum. She was a single mum. I really, really wanted to move to a big city. I wanted to go somewhere. I've always had like big ambition, big ideas. I've always been curious. And I've just felt as though I was just so desperate to go to the biggest city that I could. And of course, that was London. So yeah, that decision, it didn't even feel like a big decision at the time, which is quite funny now as a parent of young people. I'm like, oh my goodness. I was 16 years old. I had a tiny little case. I had a rolled up Christina Aguilera poster. Obviously, I thought that was essential.
Yeah.
And I got a coach from Leeds to Victoria Station.
Yes.
And
the bus depot at Victoria Station.
Yeah. And I arrived and I felt so happy and so free and so excited to start. I felt like I was going to start my life that day. I just literally like arrived in London. I was like, that's it. I can do anything.
Obviously, we're going to talk a lot about decision making. If you can wind yourself back to being 16, how did you get to that decision?
Yeah. So I mentioned my mum was a single mum. There was 3 of us living at home, so I was the older sibling. I took on a lot of responsibility, as you do as an older sibling, and my mum had to work. And, you know, she had low income. We lived in a low income house. She didn't have a lot of money, a lot of options. I feel like she was constantly stressed, you know. She was always stressed. She was always trying to manage so many things. And I just remember feeling like, I didn't feel like I was 16, let's put it that way. I had like a parental role for my youngest sibling, who's 9.5 years younger than me.
Okay.
So I definitely took on a lot of parental responsibility, and I just felt I'd had that kind of feeling of responsibility for so long. I didn't feel like I could be carefree or I could, you know, be reckless or these things that I think a lot of teenagers probably are. I was responsible. I had to, you know, like I said, get my sister and brother to a certain place, or maybe I remember like, you know, making the food, making dinner, packing my bag for school, getting the bus. I was very independent. And so I already felt like, okay, I can take care of myself if I move to, you know, if I move out. And I guess at school, I just remember thinking, I want to move to London. And so what are the options? How could I do that? And so through dance, it was like, okay, I could go to performing arts college, I could apply, I could audition, but I'd need to get a scholarship to pay for it. So I had this audition coming up and I was so confident. I just think I had this radical self-belief. And I remember telling a teacher about it, and her words, she said to me, don't get your hopes up. And it gave me, I think I already had a bit of a chip on my shoulder, but it gave me this huge chip on my shoulder that was like, why do people underestimate me? Anyway, the story went well because I did go to the audition. I did get a full scholarship funded place, of which there were, I think, 4 out of hundreds. So the audition went well. I remember getting the full scholarship, and then I just pretty much counted down the days until I could pack up my bags and go. But I still remember that teacher because I think there were so many, and there's been other things in my life since then. I've done so many things. I've had such an unconventional and multifaceted career over the last 20 years, people wouldn't believe it. But I think I kept for a long time that chip on my shoulder, that kind of, why do people underestimate me? You know, if I want to, for example, run a marathon or write a book or start a business, or why not me? Why can't I do it? So,
yeah, and
you know?
I guess at such a pivotal time, being a teenager, making that big decision and it working out to fall back on of like, I can do this and I can take these big calls. And
Yeah.
how do you then reflect on that with having a 14-year-old son who's not a million miles away from that age?
And it's so interesting because, as you'll know as a parent, I think we meet our children and we get to know them. And what I mean by that is, I think before I became a mother, maybe I thought, when I have a child, I'll do this and I'll do that, and I can help to shape and craft, and you can kind of mold them. And you can't. You meet them and then you get to know them. So my son is very different to me. And the idea of him moving out in 2 years' time, I mean, firstly, he wouldn't want to. He wouldn't want to. He would not want to. Like you said, the fact that it worked out, and the fact that, fast forward a few years, I was on the West End stage doing We Will Rock You, did the Queen musical.
Yep.
So Tottenham Court Road, the Dominion Theatre, 2,000 seats every night. Doing that, I guess, was probably the first proof point that actually when you make a big, bold decision and when you kind of go all in on yourself, whether it's, I didn't know any of this then, but whether it's your gut feeling, whether it's visualizing, whether it's just the conviction, actually, to not just say, okay, well, it worked out, because there've been many things along the way, and definitely since then, that didn't work out, but you always pivot or you always figure it out. Or I think, again, growing up, like I said, being very independent, having a lot of responsibility, what I didn't realize then that I've learned about myself is that it taught me that I was capable. I knew I could figure things out. If I missed the bus, I was like, well, how am I going to get there? If something went wrong in our house, like I said, my mum didn't have a lot of money. I used to have to fix things. Like I remember fixing, I'll change the fuse of a plug, to fix it, because it wasn't a case that we can just we'll just replace it. So I think figuring things out gave me such a confidence. And this competency thing, which is I often talk about, what if confidence comes after the decision and not before?
Yes.
Because people will say, well, how can you become more confident in their decision making? Sometimes you can't. And sometimes when you make the decision, simply by the fact you now have to follow through and action breeds confidence.
What's the worst decision you've ever made?
One that springs to mind, just because I guess it was like an ego thing, is that I'm a runner. I'm an endurance runner. I've done lots of races over the last few years. And a few years ago, I was an ambassador for Adidas. I think it was my second marathon. It was Berlin. And I'd been training really well. I'd done all the things I needed to do. And then a few weeks before the race, we took a family holiday to Mexico. And I was running barefoot on the beach, and I just felt a little twinge in my foot. And I thought, oh, come on. Because I thought, oh, I'll be all right. A couple of days goes on. It was really quite a bad injury. Got back home, a couple of weeks to go to the race. You know how this goes. I'm not going to pull out of the race. Plus, I felt a little bit of I'm an Adidas ambassador. I was going to the race, and the day before in Berlin, I was giving a talk to 100 runners about motivation and about goal setting and about mindset. So how can I pull out and turn up and go, oh, I'm injured, I'm not going to do the race? So ego me was I'll be fine. I can do it. And it was an absolute disaster. It was a disaster. So I did the talk. I'm talking about mindset, motivation, all of this. And then got to the start line and I thought, mind over matter, it's all in the mind, which is ridiculous. And I had this injury and it was agony from mile 1, mile 2, mile 3. I ended up at mile 15. So I've run 25 kilometers with this injured foot and I just couldn't run. I couldn't walk. I couldn't put the heel of my foot on the floor. So I sat at the side of the road, feeling very sorry for myself, watching runners going past, ended up going to a hospital in Germany. It was just a disaster. And really looking back, it was even at the time I felt embarrassed. I felt ashamed. I couldn't run for months afterwards. I think it was probably at least I had to have a steroid injection. I had all these things. And really, had I just said, you know what, I'm fallible, I'm human, I'm not a robot, I'm not even an Olympic athlete, but this ego that was there going, I can't, this persona, this, my work, I can't pull out of this, meant that, I just suffered for so much longer than I needed to.
It's giving me flashbacks to, I made a very stupid decision to climb Ben Nevis barefoot.
Oh.
Yeah.
Ouch.
Yeah. And like you saying, well, mile 1, you were doomed. I mean, I did a bit of training and a bit of conditioning for my feet, but I was so driven by the fact I was doing it for charity. You go all the way up to Scotland, there's all the planning, there's other people involved, people have donated money.
Yeah.
It's sunk.
At least those are good reasons.
Yeah,
Mine
but
was just my ego.
I know, but it's sort of too late to then kind of go, actually, I need to stop or turn back.
Yeah.
Third question. Why did you decide to write a book about making decisions?
when the publisher said, oh, what's your next book about? What's your next book going to be? And I had so many different things in my mind, but I thought, you know what, I don't want to write a book until something that I'm curious about becomes more than just curiosity.
Yeah.
But it kept coming up again and again. And one lady said to me, I tried to find a book about decision making. And she said, I found some, and some of them were, interesting. But she said they're all written by the same kind of person. They're all typically written by older men.
Yep.
And she was saying, it's just a different perspective. And it's not to say I certainly didn't write my book with, it's for women or it's for anyone and everyone. But I did think, it's with a lens as well of kind of modern day living. And it's so different now. Beginning of the book, I talk about just a 50-year timeline. So just 1975 to 2025. There's so much has changed in how we work and live. So I felt like some of the frameworks and books about decision making, as brilliant as they are, they needed a bit of updating with the modern challenges that we face.
I think it's so part of the reason why we wanted to have you in the chair is many of our listeners are neurodivergent. And with that can come lots of traits that are specifically around making decisions. And whether that's making the wrong decisions or impulsive, impatient kind of decisions, or whether that's actually not being able to make a decision, or it's just not having the right tools and tactics and frameworks in place to make the healthiest decisions, let's say. And so I know you have these sort of 6 golden rules. I would love it, and I'm sure you've said it lots of times, but having listened to you talk about them, I think they're so brilliant and so simple that I'd love you to just run us through those 6.
The first one is to determine the stakes of the decision. So the way I categorize this is high stakes, low stakes, and no stakes. Meaning a high stakes decision is something that potentially has a big outcome. High stakes decisions we tend to make quite infrequently, which is quite good, I suppose, but they carry a lot of weight and potential consequence. So thinking about them in a way that means, okay, they deserve a lot of time and energy. And you mentioned, impulsive, almost like emotion-led decision. When it comes to high stakes stuff, we really want to kind of be considered and use both analysis and intuition together. So high stakes. So an example might be the decision to sell your business, or, the decision to try to start a family or to move to another country, things like that, where yes, they are reversible. And this is something that I try to, especially since talking more, since the book's come out, I think so many of us approach so many decisions in life as if they are irreversible. So many. And there are so few decisions that are irreversible. There's hardly any. There's probably less than 5 that I can think of. So high stakes. If it's high stakes, it deserves time, effort, energy, attention. You need to be considered. It's not something that you probably want to do in an emotional, irrational state. A low stakes decision is just as it sounds. There's less consequence attached. However, we make low stakes decisions every day. So this is the mundane stuff. And in isolation, one low stakes decision, it's not going to have a huge impact on your life. But when you make those decisions day after day, weeks, months, years, that adds up. So we'll know, I'm sure anyone who's familiar with anything finance related will know about compound interest and this idea that accumulation is so powerful. And I think the low stakes decisions, for example, what to eat for breakfast, what time to go to bed, really low stakes stuff, it just once, it doesn't matter. But when you add that up, as I said, it can literally, and I think an example for myself is, mindfulness, meditation, down regulation. I'm someone who naturally, my energy is up. I am go, go, go. I don't find it easy to sit and be calm and zen and meditate. I've never really, even working in fitness and wellness and health, it's always been the kind of Achilles heel that I'm like, I don't really get it. So the idea of doing an extreme thing might, for me, not extreme, but I might say, okay, I'm going to do a 2-week meditation retreat. I'm going all in, because that was probably something that I would do. But actually, if I did 10 minutes a day, someone's 10-minute meditation, it's not going to change my life. It's probably not going to change even my resting heart rate might not change. Hopefully it would in 10 minutes. But if I did that every day, you can guarantee in a year, 2 years, 3 years, it's going to add up. So
feels just the total opposite of the world we live in, which is so much about instant gratification. And I'm definitely guilty of this, of like, I don't really want to think about if I do this 100 times, I might see an improvement or something might change. I'm kind of like, no, what can I do now? And if How can I short circuit doing it 100 times?
But also you said might change, whereas I think, again, back to my radical self-belief, I would argue that the proof is there that if you do something 100 times, it will change.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean? Whereas doing it once is more likely to go, it might or it might not. For example, like, a tennis serve, if you practice for 1 hour, if you practice that same shot for 100 hours, for me, I'm like, that's guaranteed to make a difference.
Okay.
Like maybe it's just a mindset, but I definitely agree that the short term, the instant win, and also the urgency. We live with such a sense of urgency because it's exaggerated to us all the time, right? Buy now, book your thing, don't miss out. Like it's this thing of fast decision making is encouraged, but also that everything's faster now. Everything. And this isn't just a feeling. When I say to people, do you feel like life is speeding up? It's not just a feeling. There's kind of some like interesting data points to support this. So for example, speed reading, we've got all these apps to help us read faster, consume information faster. There was a study looking at the average walking speeds of pedestrians in cities across 10 cities around the world. And no surprise, in the last decade, the average pedestrian now walks 10% faster than we used to because we're in a rush. It's the idea that going, okay, Adrienne, doing something for 10 minutes a day for a year, come on, it doesn't feel exciting. However, that time will pass whether you do it or not. And so again, I talked about compound interest. Saving money is a really, really like visible, tangible example of this, where if you save the money or if you don't, that time's going to pass anyway. So sometimes it's like, I think when you practice and you start to, again, give yourself the proof points that like, oh, actually, when I do that, even just start with something shorter, which is a 10-day streak or a 30-day streak, and start to see the compound effect of your low stakes decisions. But then inversely, look at, okay, a poor decision that you're making every single day over time. How is that impacting you? How is it impacting you in sleep? We're chronically sleep deprived as a nation. So sleep is one thing that, again, is so boring if I say to people, I've got the science, I've got the data. This is how being sleep deprived impacts you, your brain function, your decision making, your appetite, your mood, emotional regulation, all of these things, your hormones, everything is out of whack when you're sleep deprived.
Yes.
So if you make the decision to be sleep deprived 1 night, 2 nights, 3 nights, okay, fine. But if you are chronically sleep deprived every single day, you rely on coffee, you rely on sugar, you're making that decision repeatedly, and compounding is so detrimental to pretty much every area of your life. But it seems so, again, like a small thing, like, we all know we need to get more sleep. Well, what can I do now? Give me something better than that.
Yes. How can I fix it straight away? They reckon that over 70% of ADHDers really struggle with their sleep.
Yeah.
It's that trying to switch off, trying to calm down, having that, I guess, nervous system decompression to, quieten your mind and actually be able to get to sleep. And therefore, I guess with busy minds, ADHDers, I would imagine, are staying up a bit later.
Oh, for sure.
Then you're on the go in the morning.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's that negative cycle.
Yeah, and before you even get to the part of, okay, going to bed and having that, I call it tired but wired, that busy mind and not being able to sleep, before you even get to that, there's a real discipline piece that we're going to maybe talk more about with this kind of executive dysfunction around knowing, okay, it's 9 o'clock and I'm feeling pretty tired. Okay, it's 10 o'clock, it's 11 o'clock. And it's that discipline piece to make that decision to even go to bed in the first place. Because, if you've been busy all day and you've been overstimulated, for a lot of people with ADHD as well, having that solitude in the evening when everyone else has gone to bed, or maybe there's less distraction, it's almost like people know they're tired, but they'll still push it and push it and push it to have that 1 hour of almost like down regulation and solitude.
Yep.
So then means, going to bed late, up early, and it is that vicious cycle, which is incredibly hard to break. So I'm not trying to say, well, just go to bed at 9.
Yes.
But I think even if you can make the decision to say, okay, I know these things. So awareness is the first thing. I know these things. How can I bring a little bit of discipline in to make sure that, okay, let's start with 2 days a week. And pick those days, make them a rule, set it, in your calendar. Like those 2 nights are your early to bed nights, instead of thinking it has to be all or nothing. Because we're very binary, right? All or nothing. We
are. And I think that's what becomes pretty overwhelming when the sort of received wisdom for people is, oh my God, I've got to do this forever. Or, oh my God, this is how it's got to be. Rather than actually, if I just try it once, or if I set to do it twice. I love going to bed earlier than going to sleep, if that makes sense. That time where the day's done is really, really important. So tell me about no stakes.
Yes. Okay. So high stakes, low stakes, no stakes. No stakes decisions. And it's quite hard to think of examples, but essentially it's like it doesn't matter at all. There is no consequence to this. There's very little outcome. Like it literally doesn't matter. But we will still spend some energy, some time, maybe overthinking, maybe kind of considering, and it really doesn't matter. And again, there might be quite silly examples around like which side of the bed to sleep on, or, you know, which trainers to put on. It's like silly things, which sometimes when you just, again, awareness, just knowing, okay, this is low stakes, this is no stakes, this is high stakes, you can just kind of categorize it to then give it the appropriate amount of time.
Yes.
And to kind of just, again, it's quite freeing sometimes, quite liberating to go, you know what, it doesn't matter. And you might think in the moment that it does. So many things matter to us in the moment, which in a year or 10, you would laugh because you're like, it doesn't matter at all. So I think sometimes eliminating some of those, even some of the low stakes stuff as well, eliminating the amount of decisions that you have to make in a day can be a huge unlock from an energy perspective, because it's so draining. We make on average 35,000 conscious and unconscious decisions every day, which can sound like such a crazy number. It's like, how can that be possible?
Yeah.
But I'm sure the stat is that we have 80,000 thoughts a day. So conscious and unconscious. So you think about almost half of that is a decision, is a task, is something that even if I asked you for your coffee order, you've probably got to make 15 decisions just to just decide. You know, there's so many options. And so this optionality, this availability of abundance for so many people in the modern world, going back to, you know, what's different now to 50 years ago, we didn't used to have so much choice.
No, it's the paradox of choice, right? I like to tell myself that I hate choice, right? Because actually what it does is just gives me loads and loads of options. And the idea of being spontaneous and booking a hotel or booking an Airbnb or going out for the day. Yeah, it's not, in my world anyway, it's not straightforward.
No.
And I'm sure in this day and age, there's just a million and one more things to consider.
Yeah, in every area, from who to date, where to live, what to wear, what to watch, what to eat. We never used to have this abundance of choice. It's exhausting, first of all, to have the energy to try and sift through all of this. But also it's making us less satisfied with our final choice.
Why is that?
Because we can see all of the other options available to us. So the word decide comes from a Latin word, and it actually means to cut off, to cut away.
Okay.
So if you're choosing one out of 50, you're having to acknowledge that there's 49 others you're now discarding.
Yes.
So that breeds unsatisfaction, because it's human nature.
Yeah.
You know? So
you're rejecting 49.
Yeah. And you've got to be okay with that. Like, oh, I could have had and I should have had. And I talk about FOBO. Now, I'm sure you might have heard of FOMO before, which is the fear of missing out. FOBO, I feel like, is less known. And that is the fear of a better option.
Yes.
It holds us back.
It's the picnic. I call it the picnic spot.
Right.
You know, where you kind of just like, let's just keep going round.
Yep.
Let's go a little bit further, further.
Yeah.
Because grass is always greener and all that kind of theory.
Yeah. I think the way it's playing out for many people as well in decision making is that they are changing things more often and more quickly. So for example, I think it's a Gen Z stat, this is actually from 2022, so it might be different now, that they change their job every 18 months. Because you can just look and look on a site, or maybe this place is better, and it's that idea of change is better, because there's so many options. Let me just test it out. Let me just try it out. And I recently wrote an article actually about chaotic ambition. And actually I was really interested. So this is on my Substack. I wrote this article, and so many of the people that got in touch with me afterwards or commented, or even on Instagram as well, said, hey, I have ADHD, or I'm neurodivergent, and this that you've just described is my life. And basically what I was talking about, not to derail us too much from the 6 rules of engagement.
Don't worry,
we'll get back there.
Don't worry.
Is that this idea of, too much choice, change all the time. For a lot of people, if they're good at lots of things, which many people are, you know, it's like you've got, they're quick to learn new things. And again, in the modern world, let's be honest, we can learn things really quickly now. You know, it's like spend a bit of time, do the homework, listen to some podcasts, read some books, use ChatGPT. You can learn new skills. If you're someone you've got lots of ideas and you're very good in the beginning stage of like starting things, you can plan out the start, you can get really excited, really hyper-focused and motivated to build something. I'm doing this, I'm going all in. But then after a little while, after that beginning bit wears off, the kind of shiny new effect, you're like looking at something else and you jump and you start again. So this chaotic ambition that I was talking about is basically describing that and saying that if you are talented, if you are naturally talented, if you're naturally ambitious, it's a blessing and a curse, because in the modern world, there are so many options for you as a talented, ambitious, productive person. Whereas before there would have been maybe one or two.
Yep.
You're going to pick that thing and you're going to excel. But now, I guess the curse of it is that if you continuously jump, you're always going to be trapped in the beginning phase. You're never going to progress, see through your full potential and your talent, because you'll get to step 2, step 3, and something new and exciting will distract you.
You are perfectly describing so much of my brain there. And I feel fortunate that I have this sort of strategic break, which is being autistic, but then I have the newness and shiny, let's get on with stuff being ADHD, is I just need to find my sandpit. And if I find a big enough, exciting sandpit, there can be loads of toys and loads of exciting things within that sandpit.
I love that.
Rather than not having a sandpit and then kind of aimlessly going, let's try this one day, let's try that another day. Having spoken to enough ADHDers, you describing that chaotic ambition, and you only have to, look on LinkedIn and look at people who've jumped around jobs. I guess it's probably a blessing and a curse for, things like ADHD, where we can hop and we can get really stuck in stuff, but then we know we can change it. But then I kind of feel like that's low stakes sometimes.
It can be low stakes, but I think it depends how long that goes on for, because you can be aimlessly in this exploration phase for 10 years or 20 years. And as much as, like I said, I've had a very, diverse career. If people just picked out things from different years, they'd go, this looks crazy. But there's been a consistent thread throughout it. And I think maybe if we'll return to our 6 rules of engagement, and maybe some of the things that we're going through might also help with this. So another one of my rules of engagement is actually to call time on a decision. And that essentially means setting a deadline to make the decision, not necessarily to take action and to implement everything, but to say, you know what, this is something I've been procrastinating on, thinking about, maybe I'm going to, maybe I could, should, and it goes on. So a few more weeks, few more months. And, I've probably had some of those things in my life. Maybe you have too. I certainly know friends who've said to me, oh, you know what, I'm going to do this, or I'm going to go there. And then a year later, you might see them and, oh, how's it going? And, oh yeah, I'm going to start, but it's not quite the right time. They haven't done enough research. They haven't quite got the perfect plan. They're still thinking about it. And that procrastination piece, again, a year could pass, 10 years could pass, and you still haven't started, or you still haven't made the decision. So calling time is just a really important rule to say, you know what, set a deadline, write it down, and you have to come to some conclusion of inaction or action at that point. Because again, I listen to so many books. I'm an avid audio listener of so many books. And one book that's really stood out to me was by Daniel Pink, and it's about regrets of the dying. Are you familiar with this book?
I've heard of it, yeah.
So there's one thing that, again, relating back to towards the end of people's lives, the biggest regrets that they have aren't regrets of mistakes. They're not regrets of businesses that failed or relationships that got divorced. They are regrets of inaction. It's the thing that you always wanted to but never did.
Yeah.
So calling time, I think, can help people to overcome that procrastination on a bigger scale, not the day-to-day stuff, but the bigger stuff that we put off and we wait because it's not quite the right time. We haven't done enough research. We haven't got the perfect roadmap. We talked already about confidence. Sometimes confidence comes after the decision. So call time. If you've got enough data points there to go, right, I'm doing this, just start. You don't need another 6 months of planning.
Yeah. How can you bring other people into that sort of accountability?
Yeah, well, that's another one of the rules. So send for help.
Yep.
Send for help. So much of the time, we live in a, I suppose, individualistic culture over collective. So individual is kind of, it's all about you, self-made, self-help, self-improvement, you can do it all, you can be anything. But also if you don't, it's your fault. It's on you.
Yes.
So everything's about the self. The downside of that, I suppose, is that sometimes we don't remember that we can ask other people for help, or that other people might be able to give us advice, or they've been there before us. Everything's unique to me. No one understands because it's my, I'm the only person ever existed who's had this scenario. In reality is lots of people have done what you're trying to do before. or they may have, and can call you out as well on your nonsense and say, hey, this is chaotic ambition again. You know, like, no, enough
Just
is enough.
make a decision.
Yeah. And sometimes having those people in your life, if you're lucky enough to, it could be a friend, a mentor, a professional relationship, someone who you can be really honest with as well. You've got to take off the mask and be like, look, this is the mess. This is how I'm feeling. This is all the things I'm trying to figure out. And yeah, just appreciating that you don't have to figure every decision out by yourself. Again, take the pressure off, you know, like outsource a little bit. You can't outsource the decision and the responsibility of it, but you can outsource a little bit of the kind of the pressure and say, you know what, I really appreciate if you could help me out with this, like your viewpoint. Sometimes people just see things from a different way, or they can see a perspective of us in a situation that we might be missing. Therapy also helps with that, of course. Self-awareness, learning the tools and skills about ourselves that are just so useful. When I've done therapy consistently, I think without it, without the skills, without the self-awareness of certain habits or certain triggers or certain behaviors, I really don't think it's possible to really reach your potential. And I think people talk about potential so much, you know, in business and in motivation. What does it really mean? But I think without the self-awareness of, oh, okay, actually, I do this because, doesn't mean you're going to be able to change it overnight. But being aware of I do this because, I think is a really powerful thing for people to as well kind of go, oh, actually, do I still want to do that? Do I still need to? I have this phrase, it's different now. And sometimes I just have to remind myself of that.
Yeah.
It's different now.
I think it's so easy in this day and age to get so wrapped up in your own head, and I can find sometimes that I'm trying to think my way through things. And sometimes actually I need to talk my way through things, or I'm such a believer in action. And doing something, sometimes it will be the wrong thing, but it doesn't matter. It's kind of taking some action. I know this is sort of common for neurodivergence, of this sort of paralysis analysis and overthinking things. I've never heard anyone say like over talking.
Overacting, overaction,
like
overdoing.
I don't know how many of those 35,000 decisions that we make a day are conscious versus unconscious. Of like, actually, how many decisions are we consciously making a day?
Oh, so yeah, most of them are autopilot. Most of them, as you can imagine, are unconscious. And I think that's why even just bringing our awareness. So going back to the list, so we've gone through 4, I think now. Another one on the list, my rules of engagement, is to keep it simple. So this overthinking that you're talking about, the unconscious all the time, like just bringing our awareness to, okay, which things can I simplify and almost automate? Because that's our natural state. Our bodies will automate, our brains will automate, we'll do things on autopilot for better or for worse. So if you've already kind of automated, for example, I know a lot of people in the health and fitness industry do meal prep. And actually a lot of high performing people outside of health, fitness and wellness, but they're just, you know, busy execs or whatever, they also do meal prep. And essentially it's taking away, you think how many minutes, hours a week do we spend trying to decide what to have for breakfast, what to have for lunch, especially if you're someone who's health conscious, trying to make decisions around specifics, like they're training for a race and it's like, I've got to have this many carbs and this much protein and I've got to hydrate. It's, I mean, have you ever tried to actually hit your protein goals in a day of grams? It's a full-time job. I can't read the back of everything and do the maths in the middle of prep to find out how many grams of protein are in this. So the reason something like meal prep is, again, so simple and low stakes, it takes away, it's simplifying a huge area of your life. So you're like, okay, this food gets delivered. It's created with these macros. It's going to give me what I need. I don't have to spend any more time and energy. I can focus on bigger and better decisions in my life. Same when it comes to wardrobe. So I don't have like a capsule wardrobe all the time, but I do for certain work events. So
what do you call it? A capsule?
A capsule wardrobe.
What's one
so
of
anyone
those?
Who works in fashion will know this. A capsule wardrobe is essentially where you have maybe, say, 10 to 15 pieces that all go together. So instead of having this huge wardrobe of like 100 items, a capsule wardrobe means it's very small. So you could pack, you could travel. If you were in a hotel, it would fit on a rail. But you've got maybe 10, 12, 10, maybe 20 different outfits because they all go together rather than this outfit, this outfit. So that could be something. You can simplify your work wardrobe. You can simplify your food choices. And this can, I think, really help for neurodivergent people when they say that they struggle with willpower. So making decisions in the moment, for example, at the start of the year in January, 8 million people in this country decided to participate in dry January. So no drinking. 8 million people don't complete it, but they start it. And so that's an example of, because it's a rule, people accept it. They'll go, oh, I'm doing dry January. And other people go, oh, okay, cool. They don't try and coerce you out of it. Like, come on, have a drink. Same with,
Yeah.
okay, I'm a vegetarian. I'm not, but if you are, someone doesn't say to you, oh, come on, just try this chicken, you know, because they just accept your rule.
Yes.
So if you predefine some rules in order to simplify your decision making in life, it also helps you to uphold your boundaries and uphold the rule with others. So a simple one could be, getting back with alcohol, I don't drink at work events, or I don't drink on weekdays. If you make that rule and you kind of declare it to yourself and others, you don't have to rely on decision making on a Wednesday, or should I just have one drink, but then I won't have a drink of the week. It's exhausting. You just make the rule. I don't drink on weekdays. Done.
Yes.
No negotiation with yourself or anyone else.
Yeah. The Simplify piece, you know, one of my favorite books that we used to send and give to all Seedlip employees that joined is a book called Brutal Simplicity of Thought by Saatchi. And essentially it basically just says, look, everybody talks about keep it simple, but actually it takes a hell of a lot of work to make it simple.
Yeah.
But the work that you do, like, I don't know, it took me probably 3 years to get to the point where I have no notifications on my phone. Okay. Nothing, which can be really annoying. People like my wife.
Trying to get hold of you.
But actually, it means I feel fully in control of my phone, of when I look at it and what I look at, when. Yeah. And I'm not let's block this time out for email, or I only check my email twice a day or anything like that. I'm just like, great, I don't have any notifications. So literally, I'm going to look at what I need to look at when I need to look at it. And yeah, I don't know. It feels like the simplicity muscle is a constant thing that I am constantly trying to improve, constantly trying to make things simpler. Yeah.
But again, if you go back to what we talked about with kind of chaotic ambition or curiosity, or simplicity can feel boring. It doesn't always feel exciting and sexy, because you're going, well, simplicity means for a lot of, we think of repetition. We think of, you know, minimalism, less. And it's kind of like this idea, well, that's boring, but it's quite freeing. And if you've practiced it, you'll know it's really, really liberating and freeing and energizing when you have simplicity in certain things.
I think it's the most, I don't know, of your six, it's the one that I am, the biggest believer in, I guess, because the world's not complicated, but it's really complex. Yeah. And I know for this amazing community of neurodivergent people that are in this shifting landscape of society's understanding, people's own understanding, what's true, what's a myth, what should I do about this, what does it mean to be autistic or dyslexic today? There's so many questions. Yeah. They're not all about making decisions, but there's a lot to think about.
Yeah. Yeah. And it all relates to how we live and the choices that we make every day. You might not even think of it as decisions, but it's just choices. And I'm curious to ask you a question when you mentioned simplicity being something that you muscle, that you try and practice. And this actually didn't make it into the book. And anyone who's written a book knows the process of editing but it's really interesting to me. So I want to ask you about it. And it's this idea of Maximisers and Satisfiers. Have you ever heard of this?
No, I haven't.
So what it is that if you are, I would say I'm a maximizer.
Okay.
Maybe, yeah. So a maximizer is someone who, when they're trying to make a decision, they're trying to find the maximum, best optimal outcome. So that might be the person that, 1% improver, like they'll look at maybe a spreadsheet of options. They might do a cost analysis. We're looking at scenario planning. That is me. I want option A, B, C, D, E. I'm going to weigh it all up to maximize the decision. And if you're thinking about something like purchasing a car or a pushchair, it's that person who's tested every single one twice. Maybe I'm not that far, but maximizing. A satisfier is someone who understands the criteria and is satisfied as long as it meets that criteria. So, okay, it needs to do this job, it needs to cost this much, it needs to be black. That does it, I'll choose that. Okay. In some areas we can be both. So in some areas of my life, I'm definitely a satisfier, but in others, I'm more of a maximizer. So when you said simplicity is something that you actively try to work on, out of those two, would you say that you are one more than the other? Can you think of an example or a time in your life where you're like, actually, I'm satisfied as long as it does X, Y, and Z, like booking a holiday, booking a Airbnb. Is it by the beach? Is it the right cost? Done. Or are you a maximizer? You've got 20 tabs because you're comparing lots of options.
I'll give you the psychologist's answer to every question. It depends. Yeah. It does totally depend. I think I'm so focused on my brain being about efficiency and as linked to simplicity that it sort of depends on, I think Jeff Bezos talked about these sort of type 1 and type 2 decisions.
Yep.
But the premise is one's a door that you can go back through,
Yep.
and one's a door that you can't go back through. And I'm obviously always trying to make my life about doors I can go back through.
Yeah,
It's
so
okay,
reversible, yeah.
so that you can change stuff. What are your thoughts on regret as a concept?
My thoughts on regret as a concept is that it's an inevitable part of life. It's an inevitable part of the human experience. I think the idea of having...
Why do you think it's inevitable?
Because we can't choose everything, because of the decide and the cutting away. Regret doesn't always have to be a bad thing. It doesn't have to be, something that keeps you up at night going, I wish. I think it can just be regretfulness. Like, maybe I wasn't as thoughtful as I should have been in that instance. Or maybe I just know more now than I did 10 years ago. Because we have a mind that can scenario plan and can imagine scenarios that didn't ever exist. We can play out a whole life, a whole narrative, a whole film. I certainly can, if you've got a creative mind, of a whole conversation and a life and a whole movie.
Yep.
Never even happened.
Yes.
And I think that is almost like a torment, which I think maybe it's regret, maybe it's not, but I think it's somewhere in that realm of, is this what I've chosen because I've had to discard everything else? Is this all ultimately, the best?
You see, I think then that links to satisfaction and expectation.
Yeah.
I don't believe in regret.
Okay.
And part of that, I guess, is not because I don't care, but it's more about conviction. And also, I feel like looking back and regret and what might have been.
You're saying I don't believe in regrets, and maybe that's, again, a choice to say, I'm not going to allow myself to think, well, because I'm sure you'll agree that you've made some mistakes in life, right? But you don't regret them.
No.
So at the end of the book, I have 10 anonymous, short, almost little stories or anecdotes from people who share about a decision that shaped their lives. And somebody who contributed is in his 80s, wonderful, wonderful man with a wonderful mind. And he talks about different decisions. He says the path that we never chose, we'll never know what it could have led to. And he also shares your philosophy of, he doesn't have regrets. He says, I don't regret something I chose or something I didn't choose, because now at 83, and maybe that's really the unlock, is looking back on his life. He says, all of those choices, good or bad, mistakes, wins, failures, have led me on this path. And therefore that's the only path.
Yes.
That's the only path.
Yes.
Yeah.
There aren't loads of paths. I think also, and whether this is good or bad, I have so much evidence in my life that all the bad things that have happened have all led me to this place, which I think is a good place, which is a strange way round. And so I don't regret anything that's happened in my life because it's just been the path to, I guess, get me to here.
Yeah.
Even if they were bad things or mistakes.
Yeah. And hindsight can cast a really harsh shadow on our choices, so we can think, we've all probably had that, what was I thinking, or how did I think that was a good idea at the time? But actually at the time, you've got to give yourself grace that you made that decision with the information you had then. And I think the reason I say, just accepting it's inevitable, is, again, I think sometimes like this pressure that we have in the modern world to live with perfection, to live with no mistakes, to kind of conceal, not to have no mistakes, but to conceal them. We tolerate, I think, imperfection rather than, I think, regret. The reason I sometimes maybe say, it's inevitable, you might regret it. You might look back and go, I wish I had actually chosen something different. But you can't go back. So that wasted time and energy berating yourself over what you wish you could have done, it's almost just let it go, because everyone's going to, we're all fallible and we'll all have some decisions, I'm sure, that we will, look back on and think, it wasn't the best. But that's, it's part of life for everyone. Number 6, and I think this is probably one of the most important. I couldn't write a book about decision making and not talk about intuition and trusting the gut. And it's such a complex and difficult thing. And I'm someone who, I guess I tend to lean more towards data and science and research and numbers and maths. That's just the way my brain works. I like to be able to weigh up things. But intuition and gut can sometimes feel really just, woo-woo and fluffy, and how do you measure that? And I've just always been like, oh, okay, I really need to understand this and to figure it out. So I did spend a lot of time on this, reading, researching, talking to different people about intuition and gut. And essentially the most simple way I can kind of, I guess, explain where I got to with it is that intuition and gut feeling is pattern recognition.
Okay.
So our brains are very good at spotting patterns. Sometimes when it comes to, I'm sure many people have heard of red flags. So red flag is recognizing something and going, oh, that doesn't feel quite right. Canary in the coal mine. Again, it's the caution alarm going off in our brain saying, be cautious. We've been here before. We've seen this before. Hold on a second. Or it can just be pattern recognition in the sense of, I mentioned, sports players who've done the same tennis shot 1,000 times, 2,000, 10,000. The split-second decision when that ball is coming towards them, they're not consciously thinking, left leg here, hit the ball there, try and aim for this, look here. There's about probably hundreds of things going on in a split second for them to return the ball with the right accuracy, with the right power, the right speed, in the right direction. And it's pattern recognition because they've done it so many times before. Same thing with sometimes with doctors. Let's say they've seen 1,000 babies in their career as a GP with certain symptoms. Baby 1001, the doctor isn't a genius when they look at the baby and instantly just diagnose them. It's a combination of analysis, knowledge, and then pattern recognition. So our brains spot patterns and recognize them. And sometimes that kind of quick body response, the gut feeling that goes, oh, we can't really put into words what it is, but it's easy to recognize. The feeling of, oh, that doesn't quite feel right, or my instinct is to say no, or this person is not the right person. We have that, and that is gut feeling, that is intuition. The problem, I think, is not knowing what to do about it or trusting your intuition the first time.
Yes.
The first time. Why do we need 3, 4, 5, 6 to go, you know what, I knew the first time that I met that person or that I did that, it wasn't right.
Yeah.
But I didn't listen to the intuition because I tried to analyze my way out of it.
Because there's always that phrase, I should have trusted my gut.
Yes, the first
and I
time.
I know that really well. It's hard to visualize, it's hard to quantify, it's hard to, I guess, rationally accept that something in your tummy is telling you how to make a decision. Not your brain, your tummy.
But they're connected. So this gut-brain axis, so again, people really will understand the feeling in their stomach of, if you call it nervousness, adrenaline, anxiety, especially if you think back to being young, maybe doing something the first time, let's say public speaking, let's say a school assembly, you had to play the violin, something where you literally felt your stomach, your guts churn. We've all felt that. So that gut-brain axis goes both ways. So it can be adrenaline, it can be nerves, but it can be excitement, it can be, it's really connected. So if we understand that, okay, just before you step on stage to deliver something, you're going to have this gut-wrenching response, if we understand that it's real, it's not made up, it's not in your mind, it's physiological, it's happening, it's real. We can accept that, but we can't sometimes accept that the gut feeling telling you this person isn't right for the job, or we can't accept sometimes that that's, like you said, it doesn't feel as though you can quantify it in a way that's explainable to others. So if you said to somebody, I'm sure, okay, in my organization, I'm not going to employ this person because of my gut feeling, people might go, you can't do that. You know what I mean? And you've got obviously unchecked bias and all these things. So I think it's harder when it comes to decisions that we are responsible or accountable for. But I think in our day-to-day lives, there are so many things where we could start to like jot it down and have like a little bit of an intuition scoreboard, like a little tally.
Yeah.
And you start to realize that your intuition is rarely wrong.
And I would love to see, and if anyone's listening and knows about this, I would love to see a really good study. Like how many times out of 10 is the gut
wrong?
Right?
Yeah, I'm telling you, I would love to see that as well. I would be predicting it's going to be above 80% that it's right, because it's so, again, going back to, so many of our functions, so many of the things that happen within the processes of the body, they're there for a reason. They work without us having to do anything. Do you know what I mean? Like, and again, I've studied breath work and I'm a breath work practitioner. So I've really kind of done a lot of the science and the chemistry around, okay, the nerve and the body response, so the vagus nerve, the response to kind of down regulation. And again, something as simple as breathing. So how quickly you breathe, how deeply you breathe, breath holding, these different things, it's a mechanism that you can control, but it's also a mechanism that you never have to control or think about. So right now we've been breathing throughout, the entire conversation, the whole day, but you haven't stopped to think about it. So it's involuntary.
Yes.
But you can also take over that system and it becomes voluntary. So if I said to you now for the next 60 seconds, we're going to do it, breathe in for 5 and out for 5, just through the nose, you're going to really slow down your breath to 6 breaths per minute. That's going to trigger a response in the body that's going to downregulate you. And it's basically overriding other systems to tell the body you're calm, you're safe, because you wouldn't be breathing at that rate if you were running away, if you were afraid, if you were under attack. So simply doing that, overriding the breath, again, a very, very kind of, these mechanisms are so interlinked in the body and so clever. But again, humans, we have this conscious awareness of certain things. So going back to the gut, we have a conscious awareness of the gut, of this change of state, of this kind of feeling, this like thing that's hard to describe, that tells us, oh, that wasn't quite right. Or the other way around, like, wow. And I think I've had that in my kind of entrepreneurial life. I definitely think I've had times where my intuition and my gut has said to me, this is going to be the thing. And you can't explain it to someone, but I knew, again, gut feeling, pattern recognition, looking at things around me, spotting signals of change. And I've had it in other things where I've gone in startups, in different things, investing, just things where I've been like, I can't explain how or why I know. And Daniel Kahneman has a great quote about this. It's knowing what you know without knowing why. I didn't know why I knew it, but I knew it. And I think so it can be both ways. It's not always just a red flag. Sometimes it can be that thing that makes you go, this is so exciting.
Sure.
This is the thing.
Yeah. I think the beauty or the complexity of it is that it is this sort of red and green flag of like warning you to not do something.
Yeah.
But then also going, let's do it.
Hell yeah.
It feels right to do.
Yes. Yes.
I'm thinking of like our listeners, Adrienne, and I'm thinking, oh my God, if you even just think about the world of neurodiversity and you look at all these different neurotypes and you look at the amount of information that's out there, you look at the prevalence of that information on social media, who do you trust? How do you in your own life, when you are so plugged into what's going on in the wellness industry, for example, where every day it feels like there's another biohacking study or there's another vitamin or there's another app or there's the latest, greatest. How do you assimilate all of that information our listeners in their own worlds, could take some comfort from?
I'd say, again, I've talked a lot about my own radical self-belief and confidence, and I know that is not the case for everyone, but I think sometimes we have to start with ourselves. Everyone's completely different, and what will motivate us is different. What we'll respond to is different. What we'll find challenging is different. Processes that will work for one person, and they'll say, oh, I read this book and it changed my life and I do all these things. Another person will go, it's useless. So, for example, I have a friend who's neurodivergent, ADHD, and he had read my book. And so I asked him, okay, are there any things in here that were like really useful for you? And anything that you were just like, Adrienne, this is never going to work for me. And one thing that I talk about, basically setting false deadlines. And it's this idea that, exactly as it sounds, I set myself false deadlines. So if someone says to me, okay, I need you to write this article, a journalist, for example, and I need it by Thursday, I'll put that in my diary that it needs to be done by Tuesday. Because life happens, inconsistency happens, things will come up. And if I know that it's a false deadline, but I almost try to make it a first deadline. So then if anything happens, there's a buffer of 48 hours so I can figure it out. And he said to me, I wish I'd had that rule years ago. He said, why didn't anyone tell me that? Because it's so simple. He said, but there's so many things. He said, I leave things to the last minute. There's so many things where I've just left it to the last minute. And so he said, that's something he's tried to implement since reading the book. He sets himself a false deadline, and that could be just an hour. So it could be, okay, pretend your train is going to leave at 10, but actually it's 11. Or it could be a week for work, a work project that says it has to be completed by this date. And he said it's just been really, really helpful. So
change your watch by 10 minutes is another easy little winner.
Yeah. So again, it's experimentation, because for another person, they might say, well, that doesn't work at all because I know it's a false deadline. So it doesn't work. So therefore, again, try it. Doesn't work for you, cross it off the list. Start to make a little list. Okay, these things work, these things don't. Again, trial and error could be around diet. You have to almost observe and test something out and go, okay, if I don't have coffee for 7 days, keep a little journal. Or even just if you can't bother with that, just, something on your phone every day. At the end of the day, 1 to 5. How did you feel today? And then at the end of the week, if you're like, I felt exactly the same, maybe I felt worse, it's give things a try and be open to the fact that when you try things, it's exactly that. It's a trial. It's not a new, I'm doing this forever. I can never have coffee again in my own life. That's what I do. And I'm pretty committed and I'm pretty disciplined because I want to have the real results. To say after 90 days, this really did have an impact for better or for worse, or actually the impact was so minimal and the effort was so high, it's not worth it for me. And for someone else, maybe it is, but I've done the due diligence. I think sometimes doing things in isolation, being like, you know what, the one thing I'm going to trial, the one thing I'm going to change is going to be this, and I'm going to see how that goes and if it makes a difference. And if it makes a difference some of the time, but then, so this is the thing about change or habits or new things. If you think of any exam that you've ever had to do, a driving test, a school exam, whatever it is, you don't need 100% to pass. You might need 70%, 80% to pass. But when we hold ourselves to things, it's like 100% or nothing, or it's a failure. So let's say you're going to try something new and you say for 30 days or 90 days, and on day 11, it doesn't go to plan. It's just one day. Get back to it. Don't scrap it because, it didn't work, Adrienne. Tried that, didn't work. Actually, it didn't work for one day. Go back to it and see, give yourself, I call it 80% is a pass. If 80% of it is complete, and that can be, again, when I was training for a marathon, there were some weeks or some days things happen and you can't do the exact run on the plan, or you can't run at all. But if I do 80% of the training plan, I know when I get to the start line, my body's going to take me to, I can do it. I can do the 26 miles.
Yes.
If I've done 80%. Same with, writing deadline. If I've done 80%, I'm going to be close. So it doesn't have to be binary, all or nothing, 100 or fail.
Yeah, I'm trying to, I always, if I do something, I want to be the best at it and I want to master it as rapidly as possible.
Have you always been that way?
I think so. Or I think I've learned that my sort of time to mastery can be quite quick. I've sort of really had to exercise some patience to be like, I don't have the time to do this all the time. I've got to, really talk to myself to kind of go, you're not going to be the best at this. You're not going to master it. Who do you think you are? It's not going to happen overnight. Enjoy the process of being able to see some gradual improvement.
Do you know what this reminds me of? So the word amateur is love. It's the love of, I don't get it exactly right, so don't quote me, but I think it's the desire, the love of something new. It's basically the love of being a beginner. So to be an amateur, it's the love of something new. So when you described that, exactly, you just said, okay, I'm going to try and have patience to enjoy the process.
Yeah, and hobbies are so important. And hobbies I know for a lot of our listeners, we can have lots of things we're interested in, or we can have few things that we're heavily interested in, depending on sort of how our brains are wired. But I am really enjoying actually taking all the pressure off myself to actually just enjoy the process rather than having to have an outcome.
Yeah, and it's so hard. And actually there's a whole chapter in the book about joy, and people might be surprised to go, why is there a chapter about joy in a decision-making book? But for that exact reason that you just described, because in the modern world, so many things that we do, we assign this utility to it.
Yeah.
Is it productive? Does it make us money? Can we sell it? Can we be the best at it? Can we get people to follow us, to look at it? Rather than exactly that. Like, if you enjoy something, or let's take it the other way around. Let's say there's nothing in your life that is not about utility and productivity and gain. There's very little room for joy. There's nothing left that's you're just doing it because. There's no outcome attached. There's no final grade. Everything that we're looking at now is like, it's scored. It's scored. It's like, and rated and ranked. Everything, this podcast will be ranked. You'll have, everything's rated and ranked. Whereas if you just do something, my thing is just so, it's going to sound so lame and so boring. I love to do puzzles. It is my down regulation. If I'm stressed out, I'm like, I need to do a puzzle this weekend, and it sounds so lame, but there's no outcome attached to it. There's no one going to score it or rate it or review it.
Yeah, the process, it's all that, enjoy the journey, all that stuff that we read about or hear about or people write books about or whatever, of just, enjoy the process, enjoy the journey, but we don't. The world is conditioned, as you're saying, on like utility, and
because you can't waste time.
Exactly.
Right? You can't waste time just doing something you're not good at, because where's that going to lead you? And we learn that in
Exactly.
school, right? And I think as a
Yes.
parent, trying not to do that and to kind of go, what do they enjoy? What are they having fun with? It's a challenge. And I'm certainly never going to tell people how to parent their kids. But with our kids, we definitely encourage them to try loads of different things. And it's not because I want them to pursue that as a career or be the best. But I just think there's different skill sets. You'll enjoy it, hopefully. And I'm trying to remember that it doesn't matter if you are bottom of the list when it comes to like the weakest link on the team, or it doesn't matter if you're enjoying it, if you're participating, if you're learning, if you're doing something. I'm not sending you there so that you can go, well, maybe you can pursue this or turn it into a skill or it be utilized in some way.
But also I know how I feel when I'm enjoying something and guess what? If you're enjoying it, you're probably good at it, or vice versa.
Yeah.
And so if I'm not enjoying it, then I probably don't want to keep doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is also hard at the amateur stage, because when you're not good at something at the start, you're like, I don't want to do it.
Yeah. And so then it's about setting the right expectations. It's so complex, isn't it? I mean, you've made it really simple with those 6 rules. It's a complex subject that us talking for not very long is only going to do some justice towards. But I do, I know that a lot of our listeners and our community, executive dysfunction is it's a big topic and it's a big trait that kind of comes up for a lot of people. And it touches on so many different areas of our lives. And I think in this world where it's all moving so fast, it can become so overwhelming.
Yeah.
And so, I've loved listening to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We've had such a great response to the podcast, and so many of you have been in touch asking what you can do to help. It's really simple. Just follow, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. That way we can reach more people, and that way we can celebrate these great minds that think differently.